will be conducted by three of our alums from the 55th batch. We have with us Varun Joshi, who interned at Uber and is currently working as a PM2 at Microsoft. He was also the vice president of Barosi, IIM Calcutta's official band for the year 2019-2020. Next, we have with us Ayush Agarwal. He also interned with Uber and is currently working with Moonfrog. And he was the external relations head secretary of IIM Calcutta for the year 1819. And lastly, we have Rakesh Mondal, who interned and is currently working with Salesforce. He was the placement representative for IIM Calcutta in the year 1819. And these guys, incidentally, are also the co-founders of the PM Tech Club. So over to you guys. Please enlighten us.
Right. Hi, everyone. It's really good to be interacting with all of you. Is everyone here from IMC or are there people from outside also? Because definitely my attitude will be different if this is an all-Inder thing, right? So, are there people from other colleges as well?
So we have a lot of people from our college in the MBX program, and might have a few from other colleges.
Okay. I guess they'll also get a taste of IMC culture, so to speak, right? So it's really good to be, seeing so many familiar names here. A lot of PP ones whom I have interacted with previously, and it's really good to see such interest in the field of product management. I think when the three of us, started working on thinking of creating a club for the college, the PM Tech Club, me, Varun, Rakesh, all of us, really thought that two things. One was that the awareness for the field was pretty low, right? People didn't, not many people saw it as a viable option because they were unaware of it. And secondly, those who did decide to go for it, a lot of times they face problems as to what to prepare and how to go about the entire journey from being an aspirant to being a convert. So we thought that a club would help inculcate that culture into the college. And I think one thing is we found some very able people to take that culture forward also. There is Vivek, there's Samarth, there's Chaya, you have Webhav, you have Shubham Gatkar, you have a whole team of people, who are willing to take this forward and very glad to be here. Arun, Rakesh, anything to add from your side?
Yeah, it's the same feeling, right? I mean, there is this great opportunity that knocks, and the ISB takes a lion share of those opportunities. If you look at the industry as such, you would see that 70% of the people in product management are actually from ISB. And here we have a lot of people who come in from tech and who have great tech knowledge and background, and they can actually take up those positions. But say lack of culture or lack of intent, we don't read up on it much, or the opportunities are even less. So yeah, so this is a good effort towards it, and probably we can take it even further. Yeah. Joshi.
Thanks, Rakesh, for the formal introduction. But yeah, I guess so. The fact is that a lot of people do get into product management or do not think of product management, at least in India right now, as a go-to job when doing an MBA. Right now, still the traditional pathways of finance, marketing, or consult guy is like the go-to pathway for most people. And I think this is efficiency of information about both how to prepare for the product management job and secondly about what it requires, because there's this misconception somewhere that you need to have a very solid tech background and being from a non-tech background we cannot enter into the field. So we kind of wanted to remove those misconceptions and get you guys introduced into product management one person after your second year. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Aisha, would you like to present the
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Just a second.
Varun, if you could just speak up a bit, that would be better. Like your voice was barely audible.
Yeah, got it. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible.
Right. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I should go into the presentation mode, man. This is just the
Acha,
slide.
that's not visible. Kya? I am already there. Wait a second. Hmm. Okay. Can you see it in the presentation mode now?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So, well, this was the topic which we eventually settled on, making the most of the second year, a PM perspective, giving a PM perspective to it. And like I think me, Varun, and Rakesh will be sharing our journeys. All three of us had different journeys. Like Varun has been a PM enthusiast from day one. You know, he wanted to get into the field, and I think it was a surprise to himself also when he ended up at Uber instead of going to a product management firm after summers. But he landed up where he wanted to exactly in the finals, which is at Microsoft. Rakesh was the one who got into Salesforce and converted to PPO. While for me, it was like a journey where I initially was not very sure whether, where did I want to end up at. And I eventually came to realize that yes, PM is one field which I would enjoy working at. I felt that, and that's why I went for it. So I think we'll mix our perspectives and try and serve it to you in the best manner possible. And we'll start that by, okay, a lot of people are still joining. That's great. So we'll start that by giving you a session outlook. What all will we be talking about? We'll talk about product management as a field, and like what all does it entail, the false perceptions around it, and what it actually is, and what exactly does a PM do in his job, and what are the various kind of job profiles, how does a startup job vary vis-a-vis an established corporate PM job, and what are the different roles a PM can expect throughout his career. And then we'll talk about how does a PM interview go like, what it would be like in your finals, and then the expectations from PM case study. This is specifically around competitions, case competitions. You have some case competitions specifically from a very PM perspective, and Rakesh will shed more light on this because he he did participate in two case comps, reaching the national level. Then we'll provide you with some resources which you can go through to try and understand, a bit more about how to prepare for PM. And then we'll be talking a bit about the pitfalls which a lot of people have in their CVs. And finally, we'll be taking questions. So, of course, all of you are more than welcome to share your questions at any time you want. Just type them out, please, in the chat, and we'll take them up as and when possible. So, what to expect in a job? I think I'll let Varun take this up first. Varun?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So what to expect in a job? Okay. So the idea is like when we are first introduced to product management in the first year or
Varun, please bring the mic a bit
from
closer.
jobs that we come from. Yeah, it's like right at my mouth.
अच्छा, ठीक है, चलो,
The disturbance in the internet connection. Is it any better, guys? Sumna is writing that there's
So Varun, your
any
voice is
better.
cracking a lot in between, so it's not a very steady.
Just like wait a second. I might have to like switch my headphone. So I'll just wait for a bit. They can. I usually you take this forward for a bit. Let me switch to my headphones. That's okay.
Okay, fine. I'll start. So, guys, you can see we have divided the job into five different aspects, which we believe are core to a product management job. You can pick any product in your head. Let's just say, since me and Varun interned at Uber, let's just say we are going to talk about developing the Uber app from end to end. So, what all would there be in that particular process? The first thing is obviously the analysis. So, as a product manager, like analysis would be the first point which you will go to for developing any product. The user need identification, the market sizing, then talking to users on a very basic level, calling them up, having focus group discussions, FGDs, and user interviews and things like that, which we do in college. They are actually a part and parcel of our real jobs also, because at the end of the day, you have to create products for users, right? And to do that well enough, what you would require is to know what exactly does the user want. So I would say quite some time actually is spent in this, where you would sit down with users and try and understand what exactly do they want, right? Once you get that to a decent enough level, then you sit down and decide that okay, you've gotten 10 different ideas. For example, if I'm, let's say, developing something like Uber from scratch, so then people will be telling me 10 different things, that okay, I want an app where I can share rides, I want an app where I can book my cab, I want an app where I can book autos, bikes, anything. Basically, I want some form of transportation. So as a product manager, there would be someone would be there on a product level and would tell them that okay guys, sharing of rides is not possible initially, so we'll just provide an option to book a single cab for a single person or his family. We won't provide the share option in the beginning because that's a bit difficult to implement from the start itself. There would be some product guy telling them that okay, it's a great idea, but we'll not be pursuing that at the moment. So this guy would tell them that we have 10 ideas, but these are the two ideas which we will focus on. That's why you would see in Uber's journey also, in the beginning it just had that cab, after which sharing was added, after which bike taxis were added, and so on. So that moves on a iterative level. And who decides this? This is the product manager along with the team of engineers and the designers and all of them. So a product manager at the end of the day is an individual contributor to a product. He's the mini CEO, so to speak. You might have heard that term a lot of times. A product manager is a mini CEO. Now, what do we mean by a mini CEO? Is that he has to coordinate between the various teams, the designers, the engineers, the quality assessment team, then the marketing team. All of them would work with the product manager to ensure that the product is rolled out in a smooth and easy manner, right? So the next step to this entire process would be PRD creation, right? So you want to design the product, you want to bring all the stakeholders on board and develop the look and feel of the app. So I was taking the example of Uber. So how would they have developed the app initially? Would be all of these stakeholders would have come in a room, decided that these are the basic designs, these are the wireframes, and then individual teams go back to their pods and they'll start working on this. Then come together again and show the progress. So again, this iterative model keeps going. Then you come up with a basic product, and then you manage the rollout, right? So you have some reviews, some initial reviews for the product. You incorporate the feedbacks, and then you roll out betas. Basically, some kind of A/B testing. You can say that you release some product, some part of the product to a certain part of the population, get their feedback, and let's say you present a slightly different product to some other part of the population, and then you end up deciding कि ठीक है ये मेरा product होगा. It's like an end-to-end process, and finally you manage the product release. You would talk about marketing, you would talk about how the product would move forward, and and this is again a continuous process. People keep telling, for example, I'm currently working with Moonfrog, so we have this Ludo Club app, so people continuously keep posting reviews that these are the new features which we would require, these are the new things which we require in the app. So you can't incorporate everything, but it's a continuous process that as a product manager you have to see what are the feedbacks, what are the things that the customer wants, and try and integrate that into an end-to-end aspect. Now some people in their careers as product managers in the beginning would handle one part of this, for example maybe analysis, ideation, and PRD creation. Some people would handle the other part, which would be managing the process and the product release. these guys in particular are called design PMs and growth PMs respectively. While some PMs would handle the end-to-end thing, it depends on your seniority. It depends on the firm you're working at. For example, startups generally tend to give more responsibility to early PMs also, while corporates bring about this responsibility in a more phased manner. Uh, and that's the core difference. I think at Moonfrog, all these 5 processes I have touched upon at one point or the other, and then the rest depends on whatever my short-term goal is, and I'll work according to that. Varun and Rakesh would be working on different things. Maybe they can give some perspective about their firms, guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so first of all, is my mic working? I'll just
Right.
confirm that.
No
Yes,
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah,
better.
great, perfect.
So it takes a
Okay,
PM
thank
3
you.
months to get the audio.
Yeah, man. So, right, I'll tell you the case scenario for Microsoft. So, this entire spectrum of what a product manager does, based on the firm, as Ayush rightly said, your job profile could be amongst any 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 verticals. So, for my case in Microsoft, there are 2 scenarios. One is when I'm working on a feature for which my engineering department does not do any effort, right? For example, I am working on a feature for which there is a dependency on OneDrive and SharePoint or Microsoft Teams. So for that, I cover the analysis, ideation, and PRD creation part. But if I have to do a feature from end to end, that is for example, I'm developing like feature for my own product, and there is no dependency or there is minimal dependency and is involved. In that case, I reach up to managing the process. Product release, A/B testing is included as a part of my like job profile, but marketing is completely distinct. It's definitely not what we do here. Sales and marketing is a completely different vertical as far as Microsoft is considered. Rakesh.
Yeah, I think if some of the people who have worked as interns in product management, they would correspond to this, or relate to this, that they would have worked in mostly silos in the analysis or the ideation phase, not much on the PRD creation or managing the process, I would guess. Some of you might have worked on it, but yeah, so this would be the two things that you would have worked on. For Salesforce, yeah, I mean, so it's exactly what Varun said. So again, it's a definition that changes as and when you move up the curve. So initially you would be a product manager, and again, a product management divided into management part and the ownership part. So if you own a product from end to end, you would touch upon all of these parts across this curve. And if you are just the product manager for it, you would mostly be working on the analysis of the ideation part, where you would create the requirement document. And this is the part that actually you would be spending most time on, sorry, less time on. The most of your time would be actually spent in managing the process, right? Because getting the client feedbacks and talking to new clients to get their recommendation is the basic core part of the product management responsibility. And I think most of you would be familiar with what consulting does. Again, product management as you go up is more like a partnership or a principal. What you would do as a partner or principal in a consulting firm, your primary job then becomes basically bringing in more clients, right? The more business you bring in, and you would be managing a group of product managers who can handle those business. So that's basically how your responsibility would evolve. Yeah, yeah, Aisha, I think we can. Any questions in this regards?
Just one thing that I wanted to add. So there is this misconception that product management might be a chill job as compared to other jobs. It is not, and I think Rakesh and Ayusha would agree with me on this. So it is very demanding. Like it might be the current scenario that is causing this, but even in your internship, you might have experienced that product management is not an easy job. It's more fulfilling, definitely for us, but it's definitely not an easy job. So that illusion should not be there. There is this common belief that I wanted to clear up.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. It's not just a common thing. It's like everyone's top of the mind. It's it's less work and more money. Yes, the money part's true, but there's no such thing as less work. It's hard work. You have to, but you have to be there. You have to, scratch the surface. You have to do everything that other jobs do, and even more sometimes, right? Because the end-to-end delivery, development, and even sometimes marketing is actually your responsibility.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
Mr. Chandar. So how often, as a product manager, do you have to meet the clients?
Yeah, so it depends on if you are working, what kind of product manager you are, right? So if you are internal product manager where your products are mostly consumed by the teams within your org, so in that case not much, you can just collaborate within teams. But if your product is directly customer facing, which are being consumed either by a B2B client or a B2C client, in that case talking to clients is the only way that you can get feedbacks on the products you have released, get their pain points and improve upon them. Or if you're looking to create new products, even in that case, product marketing and talking to clients will help you a lot. So as much as time means, it's difficult because the clients also have their own agendas and their own time. So it's again becomes difficult for you to schedule time with them, but we do it as much as we can. I will let the others also answer in regards to it, but yeah, that's my perspective.
There's also a slight difference in, I don't know how it works for B2C firms. Maybe Aisha will be the better person to answer that. For B2B firms, if you are working on a customer facing product, like in my case, I have to have frequent client interactions. So dedicated customers for our products or special which have constant interaction and provide us constant feedback. So we are the ones facing them. So it's very frequent for me at least, and for the sort of product that I am working on. How is it for B2C, Ayusha? Can you enlighten us?
Right. So for a B2C, I think one of the first thing that I did when I came to my firm was talk to 40, 50 different people, right, and try and get their perspective on how they are perceiving the product. What is it that they like about it? What is it that they dislike? And that feedback is very important because it tells you the on-ground reality that millions of users are using it every day. And even though 40, 50 is a very small number, it at least gives you some kind of jump start, right? Because we monitor things like daily active users and number of returning users, and it's our aim to keep users more engaged. And for that, it's definitely very important that you should know, right, what is it that the user is enjoying. And if you're not talking to your users, then there's no point to the product which you're developing, because it's at the end of the day for them. And client perspective, I think, is very important for any product manager. Like Rakesh also said, if it's an internal product, you would collaborate with other teams to try and develop it, and there would be some kind of testing which goes out before an overall product release. And the aim of that testing is also to get consumer perspective. So yeah, client interactions are there, to answer your question in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So I had a question here. So after having interned for a while, I wanted to ask, when we do research for a particular product, and you want to come out with some features, some functionality. So how do you decide on where to stop with your research? Because the internship, you have a deadline, so you have a timeline to complete it, and so you get to know how much to be enough. So while I was interning, I interviewed, for example, 35 to 40 people myself. So when you're working in a job, how do you decide where to end your research and start with the next process?
Okay, Rakesh, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, sure. So so basically it depends on what user problem you're trying to solve, right? Say you and what part of the customer journey you are trying to aim. So basically the problem you're trying to solve and the customer journey you're trying to solve again. And also it depends highly on the market that you are serving, right? If your competitive analysis says that almost all of the basic areas are covered, you want to provide a specialized service, you just go on about the specialized service. You don't start from the scratch and give everything that other competitors have to give, so that you build an all-round generic product. You just point towards the one thing that's going to add a value prop to your customers. And the idea should be that why would a customer come to you, what's the extra value add you are providing, and you should base your idea on that. And again, there is a concept of MVP and MLP, right? The viable product that you can build so that your customers can start using it, and also your minimum lovable product. The what can you sell to your most preferred customer so that they use that product. So basically, your capabilities and what the customer wants. That's a combination you are looking for, and that's what you should be aiming at in the first go. You should not means it can be a thing a lot of people do, and what we do in MBA, that we plan for a very long term and we design out this massive spec sheet. But this is not how we plan, in the industry at all. We just say that this is a 6-month plan, these are the first set of features we're going to go with, do A/B testing, get the customer feedback, see how the product is doing, and probably then we can build onto the features. So you just limit yourself, I think, to MVP and some supporting features. That's my take on it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I guess, guys, you guys can finish off your presentation, and we'll give the questions for the end then.
Sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Right. So, like, should I start with this?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. Right. The second year product management interviews, it's not that they are like completely different, or the expectations are completely different from what they were in the first year, but they do try to dig deep, and they do go in depth. Placement process in most these schools, they have what 3 hours to God knows 4 hours or 5 hours to grill you. And that being the case, your preparation must be way more thorough. So you cannot go in an interview unprepared. So just to cater to that need, we have tried to divide the question types into distinct categories so that you can pursue each to your heart's content and feel prepared. So first of all, you start with the skills that are expected in the interview. These are soft skills. These are not question categories that you need to deal with. So the first one is coherent thought process. Now the thing is, quite a lot of people, and we have observed this, what happens is when an interviewer poses a question, you get this eureka moment, an instantaneous solution to that problem, and you blurt it out. And that is never going to work in a product management interview, never ever. Even if you have seen a similar product in line with what the question was about, and that product really solves some use case, you cannot speak that name. You have to go through this entire process of understanding your customers, understanding their basic needs, understanding the gap that the current competition is not able to fulfill, and how to satisfy that. You have to go through that entire process. And the reason is that this eureka moment, you cannot guarantee that you will get it every time when you are actually working as a product manager, right? But the process, you can ensure that you will much more reliable product manager. And so that is what they are checking when they are asking you to have a coherent thought process, having a structure to your answer that you form for the problem. So that is one soft skill that's expected. Aisha?
Right. That's actually a very good point, Varun. Because we have taken a lot of mock interviews, right, for a lot of people, and that is what we have seen more often than not, that people focus more on coming up with a great solution rather than following the step-by-step process. Because while they focus more on is a product manager, once you start the job, you start to realize that there are very few solutions which people haven't already come up with, right? They would have already considered the entire set of solutions, but there will be a lot of other constraints which would monitor their prioritization, like how much does it cost, what time will it take, and how easy is the rollout in the market, and whether the target group is saturated or not, right? There are a lot of other things which matter, right? If you try to create a cab hailing app today, it will not work because the market is probably very saturated. It will be very difficult for you to get off the ground, right? And if you try to create something else, maybe a lot of gaming companies and new games are coming up. Maybe that is a market which you would be able to target pretty well because it's a very growing market. So it's not always, the point is, it's not always about the idea itself. It's about the entire end-to-end thought process. And we'll talk a bit more about that when we address the question categories, right? Because in them, going step by step is more important. What a lot of candidates end up trying to do is, like, they'll be given a question and it's like they'll be trying to solve global poverty in that. Instead of addressing one particular issue, trying to drill down to the issue which you want to solve, they'll be trying to solve everything at once. And that is something which becomes very problematic in the interview, because however intelligent you might be, if you're trying to solve everything at one point, at one go, then it will lead to a problem. You yourself will become very chaotic. You will not be focused. Your answer will not be focused. And that is where communication comes in. You need to continuously talk about what you're thinking, and you need to continuously try and structure the problem in such a way that you end up to a point where you're only solving one or two particular issues. I'll give an example for that. Maybe you're told to design, let's say, Google search for kids, right? So you've been given this problem statement. So maybe when I say that, some people will go blank while others will immediately start thinking of solutions. But the right way to go about that would be that you're thinking that, okay, who are my target groups? Okay, kids are the target group. And within kids, now who all will be the stakeholders? Kids themselves. And at the same time, the other stakeholder, the indirect stakeholder, will be their parents, right? So now when you go forward from this point, you'll keep the fact in mind that yes, parents are also a stakeholder. So one of the things further down the line you would come up with would be maybe some kind of security to ensure that parents feel happy and secure that their kids are not looking at something wrong, or they're not looking at something which would disrupt them. So the step-by-step process is important, and you constantly need to keep on talking to your interviewer. You can't treat them in a silent manner that, let me just take 5 minutes and I'll come up with something. You need to carry them along the entire step-by-step process, because this is what they continuously look at. That how is this guy thinking? How is this guy forming his thought process? How is he structuring the problem? That is more important to them. Because at the end of the day, as I said, solutions are something which would not be very unique or very radically different, right? They would at the end become something which has been thought of before. But what is more important is how you end up at that particular solution. And when it comes to domain knowledge, I think Rakesh had a few distinct inputs. Rakesh?
Hey Rakesh, you still on the call?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, means it's some of the companies that do come on campus, right? They would be serving a very specialized group, and they would some expect that people who are interviewing, or are in the interview, they are expected that they have read up about what the domain they are going to work in, or the domain that company operates in. What are the trends, market trends that are happening around the globe? What are the technology stacks, or not stacks per se, but the technology that the firm operates in, and to have a basic all-round knowledge that when asked a question, you can actually answer stuff about it. For example, say Salesforce, right? When they come for finals, most of their questions or the cases that they ask would be based around CRM and how it operates. And so basically, you have to be prepared around what kind of CRM products are there, who are the major competitors, what kind of products they provide, and such. So yeah, and even if it's an AI company, you should read up about AI, right? And what kind of stuff they provide. If you're interviewing for Adobe, you should read up on some of the design principle or the design things that have come up in photography. So that sort of thing. Yeah. Aisha?
Right. So these are the basic skills expected: coherent thought process, communication, domain knowledge. And building on that, we'll delve a bit into the various kinds of questions which are asked. It mostly is limited to this, but of course it can be more. However, these are definitely the types of questions you should be familiar with. So the first one I think we'll be addressing would be guesstimates. Varun, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, I'll try if my mic still works. Yes. So, right, guesstimates is not something that you will probably be unfamiliar with. So the idea behind a guesstimate is to understand your coherent thought process. That's the entire point. For you, like they basically try to put quant and logical assumptions behind an unstructured problem. Right? Is that the sort of guesstimates that are asked are not like how many birthday cakes are being cut in Delhi right at this moment. The very common sort of guesstimates. These are not the sort that are asked. There is a possibility that these guesstimates would be tech related. For example, a very famous one that some of you might have done for your summer preparation would be how many queries does Gmail receive in a single day? Essentially, the thing is, this is not unlike any other guesstimate. Here too, you have to break the problem into pieces, but you should be able to think along the lines of when they say query, I think of an SQL query. You can read, write, search, etc., etc. And similar queries would also work for Gmail. So let me break them down. Let me make an assumption about how many of such activities would be performed in a single day by a single person, and then let me average out and calculate that over the entire day. So the basic thought process behind like solving the problem is the same, but you should not be like scared about the fact that it sounds so technical that hey, someone's saying give me the number of queries that Gmail gets us in a single day. The basics are the same, but you just have to understand when they say query, you should be able to break it down into typing in those directions. A second category of guesstimates, which is very common in product management, is bottleneck estimates. Require you to identify a constraint. For example, a famous guesstimate is give me the number of tickets that are booked in Book My Show in my city. So one could start solving this problem by understanding what's the demo watch movies, but that's the wrong approach. There is a constraint in this problem, and the constraint is the number of seats available in cinemas in the entire city. Basically, it's a supply constraint. And unless you start the problem with that approach, with that thought process, you won't be able to solve it. So these are two categories of guesstimates that I find very common in product management. I have faced them quite often. So, Ayesha,
Right.
would you like to add anything or go to?
No, I think that fairly covers guesstimates, right? And just one thing I would like to add in all of this, for those of you who would have touched upon consult prep, you would see quite some overlap between the two, right? And I think the three of us did talk amongst ourselves that we'll talk about this, but I think maybe we can address it now. And the fact is that the preparation for product management and consult is both of them is pretty similar, right? Maybe PM is a bit more specific. You need to be more aware of technical domain knowledge, but the part about coherent thought process, about better communication, and even the case prep, right? A lot of these cases, we have provided you a litany of resources in one of the last slides, but like a lot of these cases you truly understand when you sit with someone and do case practice, buddy practice, right? Somebody asking you questions and you answering them, and you taking them through the case step by step, right? That is what will help you understand how all of these things work. For example, product design questions, right? I'll address it, and maybe you'll understand a bit better what I'm trying to say. So product design questions, one of the most popular approaches when we think of product management is the circles approach. But the fact is, the circles approach is actually specific only to product design, right? All the other questions have, all the other types of questions have their own frameworks, but circles, which is the most commonly associated one with product management, is limited to product design. Now, when you read these cases in books like Decode and Conquer, or when you read Cracking a PM Interview, again, the two popular resources which are suggested, you'll not understand them fully. What are the nuances? What are the issues you would face when trying to solve a question through circles? So for things like this, you would actually need to practice, sit down and practice with someone. That is when you'll iron out the small issues. Now in product design, what I find is more often not is that people are trying to force fit the framework into their solution. That they'll go step by step. That okay, circles comprehend the situation. Okay, I'll comprehend the situation. Then identify the various personas. I'll do that. Then report customer needs. Okay, next I'll do this. But when you look at the solutions a bit more carefully, you will realize that even the solutions themselves don't always follow circles. Basically, what they do is they follow part of circles, whatever part of circles is suitable to that particular question. Now, some questions, maybe the customer need is told to you very clearly in the itself or in the case itself, and you don't need to delve on that, right? What you need to maybe delve a bit more in is what are the pain points of the customer, what are the problems the customer faces while trying to use that product. And sometimes not even that, maybe what problem you would face is that okay, the customer has 10 different problems, and what is the problem which you have to solve. Sometimes the case becomes more about that. So in product design, uh, two things: going step by step is important, and secondly, to understand which steps to follow and which to not follow, and that will totally depend on the kind of question you're solving. For example, one question would be that design an alarm clock for the elderly. Another question is design Google search for kids. Another question might be that design Uber for differently able, or it might be something like design Netflix from scratch. It might be any of these questions which you are faced with, and all of them are very solvable questions. The only catch is that you need to go step by step. That's all there is to it. And the next one, I think, root cause analysis. Root cause analysis is actually one of my favorite types of question categories. Uh, these are again, all of these guesstimates is a 30-40 minute thing. Product design is a 30-40 minute thing. Root cause analysis is something which can go up to an hour. I remember I had a root cause analysis in the third round of my Moonfrog interview, and it went up to an hour. The question was simple, that Amazon has observed that its fashion category sales through the app have been falling for the past 2 weeks. Find out the reason and rectify it. A two-line question, and it took me an hour to solve, because again, in root cause analysis, as the name is self-explanatory, you need to find the root cause. Now, how do you end up finding the root cause? You have to go step by step. Here, the communication part and the coherence of thought process becomes very important, because you need to, either go through one of two ways. Either you form mutually exclusive and completely exhaustive case buckets, that okay, these are the various buckets where problem can potentially be. The buckets being, let's say, payments is one bucket for you. One bucket for you is the recommendation page, which is basically where you see all your fashion items. One bucket might be for you the search itself, and you can form 3-4 more buckets like this, and those would be your mutually MISI, it's called, mutually exhaustive and collectively exclusive buckets. Or you can go through the customer journey map, that what would be the customer journey for a person who's trying to purchase something from the Amazon fashion page. So I approached it through the second method, and so I would go page by page, that okay, in the fashion purchase, what would be the page by page or the step by step for the customer, and I isolated the step where the problem was. And the interesting thing for product questions is the problem can be something like the sorting button is in such a manner that basically the priority search options for a customer in fashion would be maybe the color, the size, the brand. But in our scroll button for Amazon, the brand and the, let's say, color options were very low on the scroll bar, and that's why customers were not clicking on it. And that was the solution. Change the scroll button altogether. So maybe it was a genuine problem for them, and that's why they ended up changing it. And you'll have hundreds of more examples for root cause analysis, and you will find parallels in consult prep for this. In consult, you would have questions like XYZ factory has 3 types of metal products which they are manufacturing, and even though the revenue is falling, then why is it falling? Even though sales are up, revenue is less. Why is that so? And things like that. And that is what root cause analysis is all about. I think Rakesh and Varun would add more on this, guys.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add to root cause, you are pretty thorough, Aisha. But the only thing I'd like to add is you will be very tempted to use profitability as a framework to solve these cases. It's like not very difficult to use profitability to solve cases of root cause analysis. But the thing is, quite a lot of time, the customer funnel or the user journey works really well because the interviewer is expecting you to delve deep into each part. There's this thing, for example, if you were to solve an Amazon use case, like the sort that Ayusha gave, or it could be that Amazon is having a large number of returns for the past 3 months. So when you approach the first part of the customer journey, so there was a case, a friend of mine was asked in direct eye. He had to break the entry point for the customer, which is the customer can interact with Amazon via app, via desktop application, or via a third party link, basically a link on another side or an embed on another side, or an advertisement basically. So he had to break telephones into iOS and Android because the problem was in iOS. So that level of in-depth understanding or a breakdown at each and every level is required. So sometimes profitability does not do the trick. Sometimes user journey is the only way to go. So there, it does happen sometimes. I'd advise you to go with user journey, but it's not like profitability is the wrong approach. So I cannot say that just don't go with it. But user journey is usually more thorough. Expectations are usually user journey. So that's the difference between consult and RCA for product management.
Yeah, yeah, but you can go ahead with the basic tech now.
Okay, Rakesh, so basic tech. Okay, right. Sorry, yeah. Okay, for basic tech, right. Uh, so there's this misconception for people who pursue product management that they have to know coding. I've had this question asked to me so many times that I should have a tech background, I should know how to code, and only then can I crack a product management interview. They do not ask you coding questions. Like it would be a very rare company that goes ahead and asks you to like asks you a linked list question or asks you to swap numbers between two variables. That's very rare. It has happened, but it's very rare. So you do not have to prepare for that sort of a thing. The tech questions that they do ask you are things like how does the internet work, and it's direct eyes ask God knows how many times, and quite a lot of people have faced it. Even in my previous batch, in the batch previous to that, and potentially you will also face it. So these are the sort of tech questions that are asked. There was an interview scenario in which a friend of mine, while he was giving that interview, the laptop of the interviewer was turned towards him, and the interviewer refreshed the Facebook page. And basically, he asked him, why is it that the left side of the page is loading first and the right side is loading later? This is a basic tech question. You should understand that the left side is static content, and that is stored in the cache. But there's a polling or an API call for the content on the right side, which is a news stream, which is refreshed at every. Understand these nuances, and that is what they expect from you in terms of basic tech. So basically, surface level understanding, and not how do you design architecture for something. For example, they do not expect you to do that. So that kind of comprises basic tech. Other than that, we have added a few resources which have questions along these lines. So you can refer to them. We'll go to that later. Rakesh, do you want to add something? Or Aisha?
No, I think that covers it, right? Yeah.
Right. I think we can pick up dashboard design next then.
Varun?
Varun, you're on mute.
Oh, it's me again. Okay. Yeah. So I've been advised to slow my tempo because I have a 1 second lag somewhere in between. Is that true? I'll just slow my tempo a bit. Okay. So design critique is, I think, one of the most common questions that is asked. Microsoft asks it quite often. And you must have heard of this question. Like anyone who has ever tried preparing looking for a product management interview. The question goes something like, tell me about your favorite product, or tell me the product. And the thing is, there is a standard framework for doing this, which is there in Decode and Conquer. The framework is essentially describe the usefulness of the product, basically how it solves the use case of your. The second is describe how easy it is to use, how intuitive is it. The third is that try to understand is the product very innovative in some way. So this is the standard framework that you can use, but this is not something that everyone goes by. In fact, Ayusha, if I remember correctly, you had a very different approach to a design critique problem, if I'm not wrong. Can you introduce that here, if you remember that?
Right. I think it was very similar to this, not radically different, but right. The point was, I felt that it would help cover things, like it would give more of a structure. So it was around the usefulness of the product, right? The first thing which I covered was the usefulness. How useful is the product to the user, right? And the second thing was the efficiency of the product. For example, the ease of usage, basically, whatever the product is trying to do, what is the ease of usage and how efficient it is. For example, again, I'm going back to the example of Uber. So if you have to think about the efficiency of Uber, maybe you can pick 3 or 4 metrics, or maybe you can think of it that the aim of Uber is to provide you with cabs seamlessly. So now you can pick a litany or a host of factors on the basis of which you can drill down on the efficiency. So that was the second thing which I looked at, how efficient is the product. Then innovation, like this is another criteria which I looked at, that how innovative is the product, whether it tries to do something in a unique or a different manner, basically something which catches the eye, or would kind of become one of the USPs of the product perhaps, right? So that would be the innovation angle. And these were the 3 things which I felt would more or less help you understand well enough what the product is. Then some other factors which intuitiveness, how intuitive is the product, basically whether I have to sit down and understand each and every feature, each and every button, and then I would be able to use the app fully, or is it like I open the app the first time and it's very intuitive and very easy for me to understand the entire flow of the app. So these were some of the things, the main 4 things I looked at: innovativeness, intuitiveness, then your usefulness, and your efficiency, right? And that's about it for design
Yeah.
critique.
Just to add one more thing. So the idea is, this question, if you mess it up, it gives a very wrong impression of you. So this is your favorite product. You should not mess this up. The expectation is that you have conducted ample research on this favorite product of yours. So that is one thing. The second thing is companies try to unsettle you by saying, hey, name 3 of your favorite products or 5 of your favorite products. So ideally you should not prepare one favorite product. Ideally you should prepare a list of favorite products, because that is very common. And finally, when they say product, they might not necessarily be expecting a tech product. You can give them a common product. If they say describe your favorite application, then it's a tech product, it's an application. But when you say favorite or worst product, it could also be a normal physical product. For example, in an interview, it was a case that I was doing with a friend of mine. In that, when he asked me the product I dislike the most, I described IIM Calcutta's doors, just because they have a bad user experience. The classroom doors have handles on the inside, and when you see the handle, your intent is to pull, and they never open when you pull them. They open when you push. That can also be a product. You understand? So and wraps it up for me. Can we move to product design and wireframes?
Pricing is left, I think, and product design. Just give me a second. Right. I think in the interest of time, we'll do it a bit faster, because I think Rakesh will talk about case studies and case competitions also. So I just finish writing and move on to that. Then maybe we can come back to this if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I think pricing is the least asked question, I would say, in an interview, but but nonetheless they sometimes would ask you. And I think this boils down to your basic MBA prep, where you say, what is your pricing, what is your product based on, right? If you want to just match your competitor, then you do a competitive pricing. If you just want to, if you are the only player in the market, you can do a cost based pricing just to cover your cost and just catch the market. Or if you are providing something, a product that provides a value beyond anything else, or which has a unique value prop, then you can afford to even price it a lot higher than normal products, just because your customers will be willing to buy it because of the value it provides. So again, it boils down to the product that you have designed in the product design phase, and apply it in the pricing as well. But in case they want to drill deep into the pricing, they can, because pricing depends from on a lot many factors, like the SKU size, the feature set, the licensing framework that the company uses. So probably that will get very complicated if they want to make it. But probably they will limit it to what is the pricing model that you want to use, and that will be the basic pricing models that you have identified during your marketing classes in MBA. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So
We still have dashboard design left, right?
oh, okay.
Right. I'll just like cover it quickly. So actually, this is a rare. Yeah, sure. So this is a rare question actually. It's not asked people because the thing is, I while preparing never really found a lot many examples of this question, right? So it was tough to prepare for this. So I'll give you the framework that I got. One, there is a resource in this slide on that dashboard design. It's a link basically. So whenever the slide is shared with everyone, you can refer to that. It basically categorizes dashboards into various types. So you will get like one like thought process from that. The second is, whenever designing a dashboard for anyone, when an interviewer asks you to design a dashboard, there are three things you should keep in mind. One, who is the dashboard for? Second, what is the business model of their company, right? And the third is their goal. So I'll give you one quick example to make you understand this. For example, if someone asks me to design a dashboard for Jeff Bezos, so that is basically Amazon, right? So for Amazon, for Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO, the first thing is his matrices will be important, yes, but they will not be drilled down deep. Basically, it won't be like there will be many layers to the matrices. And after one point, Jeff Bezos is going to end up calling up some junior office and asking him what the hell is up. So he won't really use them for analytics. Basically, they should give him a working knowledge of the health of his organization. Second is, you should question here which organization are we referring to? Is it like home, that is Amazon, or AWS? So you should make that clear. And that being the case, the business model of Amazon is they are a marketplace. Right? The third is the goal. So for Amazon, right now, potentially the goal could be they want to acquire as many customers as they can. They're burning some money. So keep these three in mind and think of revenue, cost, and profit. These are the broad matrices that you think of, and it drives its revenue. For example, for Amazon, it could potentially be average bill value into number of monthly active users into percentage of monthly active users that make a purchase. This could be an equation. This equation gives you three matrices, and you can feed another set of matrices into these. For example, the average bill value can be broken down into number of categories and average bill value of each category, right? And so on and so forth. And you decide that Jeff Bezos is a CEO. After this point, he won't be digging in deeper, and at this point, he'll make the call. So you make that call. That what is this sufficient point that you stop at? So that is the approach for it. And hence you are able to construct this entire dashboard, breaking down revenue into an equation, breaking down cost into an equation, and breaking down profit into an equation. So that's the approach you should ideally follow for dashboard design. And you can refer to the resource that is there. Yeah, Rakesh, I think I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah. Just before we get started on this, there is one thing we didn't cover here, and that was your basic, CV health. Luckily or unluckily, I was the place rep for a while, and I have seen a lot many placements going on. And the the feedback that I received the most is that people who write their internship points, and especially who have done in product management, they write it in a format that is mostly not understandable for the interviewers, and also when they ask details about it, or run through with them, they are not able to answer it. So the first one is obviously there are just is just a dump of numbers, and there is no context to it, and there is no logical processing of the information, that of the work that you have done. So one thing, while designing your points of the internship, again, go back to your basics, talk to your senior or whatever, just get your facts about what exact work you have done and why you have done it and what has been the result of it, like the basic KR framework. Do not dump just numbers across it, that I have helped design this product. They know you have not launched the product or not done from end to end, and you now know the basics of all the numbers, right? They want what actual work you have done and why you have done it. So that should be prioritized there. And also, before you go into an interview, or when you are prepping for it, that's one, assign a chunk of your time to run through the points that you have written. Each point should be such that you are able to justify it to the fullest. They can drill deep to the deepest levels, and you'd still be able to answer it, because that's what you have worked on, and that's also the most important part of it, because for the first or the second round probably, or maybe, will be based on your CV, right? Or at least one of the rounds will be entirely based on your CVs, at what work you have done. And this holds true for you, for your work ex, that you have done in a tech domain as well. If you have just dumped numbers, this is high time that you change it, especially if you are making a product management CV. So that's on one advice that I just wanted to put out there. In terms of case studies are particularly not very similar to the actual product management use case, because they don't actually involve a lot of marketing use cases, or market sizing cases. But it does involve an end-to-end flow as such. And these are the four distinct areas that it might cover. It can cover any of them, or like any combination of them. So it can just be analysis, just ideation, or combination of both. And it might just be the product release part, where you don't have to work on the first three. So a lot of the people, and a lot of complaints or feedbacks that companies provide after a case study, is that people have just written about their ideas a lot, but they have not justified it through proper validation of why you are designing this, who are your competitors, and what kind of product they are providing, and what kind of product you would be provide. Is that you matching them, you are doing a value add on top of it, you are doing a partnership on top of it, what's your revenue model going to be. So you need to provide all these details. It's not just a globe standard statement that you make, that yes, we are going to provide this set of features which is just going to do better. You have to provide justification as to why it will do better, and also the projections of it, that these are the target groups that you are aiming for. So basic analysis would involve identifying your market and identifying the product. Say they have asked you to design a chat. Now there are 1,000 chat apps here, WeChat, WhatsApp, Facebook, Telegram. You just can't design another one of them. That just makes no sense, right? You have to add some value add to it, to whatever you are designing. Then that's where the ideation phase comes in. So you design a central theme, and around that you design your 3 or 4 products, features. Again, don't design 10 features, because no one in the right sense, or a product manager, will read through those 10 features, right? You design a epic, or 3 epics at most, uh, and assign a MVP to one of them, that this is the minimum viable product that you're going to go with, and these are 2 of the additional features that are going to help bolster that MVP. Do not write more than 3. That's just going to hamper your chances even more. The third thing is the design phase. This just adds more details to and bolsters your idea better and gives a whole different dimension to your product idea, because here you're saying what the UX is going to be like, how the customers, what is the look and feel of the product that you have developed is going to look like, and also how the customer is going to interact with it. It can be a very novel idea, or it can be just basic steps that yes, these are the steps that the customer is going to follow. What it does is it basically gives an idea to the case study reviewer as well, that this is what your app is about, right? He will get a visual idea of it, and that's a very good thing. And I have written on a couple tools. You can use Balsamiq and Proto.io for drawing these wireframes, but there are a lot many other tools, whichever you prefer, that works. And last part would be product release, and that would involve rollout. Like, do you want to release it to the entire body of your customers, or do you want A/B based testing? And then some revenue projections, that when are you going to meet your break even numbers, or what are your 5-year projections going to be like if you are going to make profit as such. And then obviously the KPI design, right? Designing the feedback loop. What are the key indicators that you're going to look at? Some of the dashboard design, some of the key metrics, etc. So do not write like a lot of theory. Be precise. Take help of pictures as much as you can, and do not overload on a lot of features. So that's the general brief idea about it. Yeah, I think we can move on to the resources part.
So just one thing I wanted to add. From the dashboard example itself, when Rakesh said KPI, there's a potential category of questions that might be asked. We haven't faced them in the past, but they could be there. So these questions are basically, tell me how would you measure the success of a feature. So here, for example, the question would be that how would you are the product management for Facebook success for that. So the approach that Rakesh told you about and the way we design dashboard, basically we understand the goal, which might be to acquire more customers, and we write an equation for that goal. It's going to end up using your feature. For example, for Amazon, it was average bill value multiplied by whatever the equation I gave. So at each point you measure what do you want the ideal value to be, and understand that how is it getting impacted over time, and you give this as the success metric of your feature, and that's the approach to follow. So like KPI design in itself could be a potential question. I haven't faced it in the past, but it can be a potential question that has been asked to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, fair point. KPI questions in themselves are rare, but what I have seen in a couple of interviews and personally experienced also is, instead of making it a separate question, if let's say they are walking you through a root cause analysis or a design question or something, they'll throw in a question in between that, okay, what are the matrices which you will look at to see the growth of this product, and what are the negative checks which you will look at to ensure that something is not wrong with the product. And it's not very difficult, honestly. It's highly driven by common sense. The only thing which you need to keep in mind while thinking of these matrices is that the negative checks one, I found them to be more challenging than the positive check matrix. For example, like again, I'll come to Uber. Sorry for that, guys. I've been using Uber as a example quite frequently, but right. So basically, for let's say Uber Eats, what would be the things which they would look at to ensure that growth is good? Maybe it will be the number of orders per day to the average revenue or the average order size, or they can also look at something on a larger scale, number of orders per month, the revenue driven per month. And negative checks might be, you might say that, okay, the number of restaurants or partner restaurants which are there on our platform, or number of returning users. So are the number of returning users going down? If they are going down, that is a negative thing, and you need to look at that quite exhaustively, that why is it happening. So point is that matrices would not be hard, and it is something which you can do. It's just keep this negative checks thing in mind. That's all. And we'll come to resources now. I think right. these three different, this is not limited to what all you can do, but if you complete this, this is, trust me, more than comprehensive. The general reading part, I personally read half of these books after I completed my PM interview. Varun was the one who who had read them beforehand. But honestly, this is for your information. It will help you gain more knowledge in terms of understanding what the tech domain is like and what are the small things which you should have in your head, things which would accentuate your domain knowledge. But these are not necessary. What are necessary would be the case books which have been mentioned and the websites which are mentioned. They'll be very helpful to you. Decode and Conquer and Cracking the PM interview is something which you would have heard from the days of your intern placement prep. But these two are slightly rarer. A lot of people would not have opened these books, which is basically the product manager interview and case interview. Right? You had something to add, Varun? Please go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, Decode and Conquer and Cracking the PM interview give you a general idea of how to approach cases. The other two have actual cases. So
Right.
like the product manager interview has 164 cases, if I'm not wrong. The new version has even more. And the last one, the case interview questions for tech companies. So this is slightly interesting. So this has questions for tech companies for non-product roles even. So essentially, so this could be a very interesting book for anyone to approach. So this gives you like domain knowledge about companies and like kind of helps you understand what are potential questions that let's say Ola could ask for a non-product management position. So because essentially it is a tech company. So those are questions that you could really find useful. So that book is really interesting. And by the way, Aisha did read Swipe to Unlock, and I think both of us agreed that even like people who crave about not being from a tech background, this book is excellent. It really knits together like the tech world and the business world and tries to understand and it helps you understand like how technology was used, why was it used, when was it used, and what was the business use case it was really trying to solve. It really knits that well together. I think like that right there. Aisha, or
Right.
should I like try to discuss the website
No,
also?
I think fair enough. Like Swipe to Unlock is a book which was definitely very helpful. If you happen to read it, you'll see the introduction of the book itself says that this book is for those people who are not from a tech background and want to understand technology, want to understand product management and things like that. And it gives you a perspective. It talks about things like the differences between, let's say, iOS and Android. And some people might have heard of this thing that iOS devices don't have viruses. What is the basis of that? Why is that happening? Then it would explore questions like why was BlackBerry so famous at one point, and when the smartphones came into the market, why did BlackBerry fall behind? It explores a lot of business perspective. It's very interesting read, and it will tell you how to think from a technical perspective. You don't need any kind of expertise, and it can be a very fun read when you have the time for it. And it will definitely help you. Like if you can quote one or two instances talked about in the book in your interview, it will be like a brownie point. Not necessary, obviously, but definitely something which would add to your profile or which would add to your interview when you're talking to the interviewer. And finally, I think the websites themselves, these are the resources which you can approach, right? Some of them are blogs and handles which you can follow and, get daily updates about what's happening in the tech world, what's happening in the product world, and what are the latest trends happening. And some of them like product management exercises and all self-explanatory. You can go to Stellar Peers or PM exercises and you'll have a lot of cases to approach, right? And these websites also help you connect with other people who are preparing for product management. So I mentioned, right, like, and all of us would agree that preparing cases with someone else, like buddy cases, that is very important. Like you cannot prepare for PM in a silo. You need to practice cases with others to actually get a hang of things, to iron out the nuances which are there. And these websites actually help you connect with people who are preparing for PM, and you can have these cases with them as well. And anything else you want to add for this, guys, or should we take up questions
Just
now?
Yeah, just a quick one. So Stratchery is basically a site. Could you go back? Yeah, Stratchery is basically a site on which you can type any company's name and you'll get the business model of that company. So it's very useful for general awareness. The Medium link that I have given here is a link that describes the entire user design experience of an actual UX designer for the Audible app, right? So it's so this is a handle on Medium, and this is just an example. So and Study Tonight. So this site is basically a consolidation of all basic tech knowledge, basically DBMS basic concepts or operating system basic concepts. So you don't necessarily have to go through it all, but it could be useful. So I just put it there for the sake of it. And Geeks for Geeks. So it's I don't know if you should really go for the site. This is usually a coding prep site, but it has some interesting questions that come sometimes in interviews. For example, how does the internet work? You can find a really good answer at Geeks for Geeks here. So yeah, that's about it.
Right. I think from our side, that was about it, guys. Uh, we have covered a lot of things, thrown a lot of jargons at you guys, but the purpose of this session was to tell you basically what all you can do in the second year, to prepare for PM. And I think case studies and case prep and understanding what a PM role is all about, those were the key areas which we thought would help you get up and running. So if you have any questions around any of this or any questions in general, please feel free to ask.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
So, hello.
Yeah, you're audible. You're audible.
Yeah. So my question is it? I mean, is there any possibility for guys who has done internship in sales and marketing or general management, can they get shortlisted in product management? I mean, is there anything we can do to get shortlisted in PM?
Yeah, so there is
There is
like,
a
can I
survey
answer this?
going on. If you
Yeah,
could, if you guys could mute your mic.
yeah. Once you've answered your question, you can mute it. Mute your mic. Yeah, perfect. So Aisha, I'm taking this question because I just want to give an example. Do you know Shantanu Valli from your senior batch? So he did a sales and marketing intern in Johnson and Johnson, and right now he's a product manager at VMOX. So it's like not unheard of. People from these roles do get into product management. So it's not like the internships is gonna adversely impact your chances of getting a product management shortlist. So, and there was nothing specific that he did. He just prepared for the product management interview, and like, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, according to me, it shouldn't be a problem really. Aisha.
Right. And additionally, quite a few of the firms which come in, right, they would give cases initially, and you can submit those cases and get a shortlist for the next round. So it might depend more on your case submission than perhaps on your exact background. So that is there as well. And as he gave the example of Shantanu, uh, he changed from sales and marketing to product management. He was there, I remember, one of the people in Moonfrog also. And additionally, I would say there are other people who did not intern in product management at all, but had some maybe technical background in the sense either they worked for a tech company or they worked for or they studied computer science, right? They would
Yes.
also get shortlists. And right, so these are the things, cases or some tech relation in your background. Either you work in a tech company or you have computer science as your degree, or right, I think that would be it. And the third one, I don't know, because a lot of times placements and shortlists are a black box. So you might still get a shortlist. Rakesh would shed maybe more light on this. Rakesh, is there any secret sauce? Rakesh, you're on mute.
Yeah, Aisha, I'm back. Yeah. So I don't think so. I mean, it's just a combination of all three, right? Means if you have a PM intern, it's very good. If you have some even analytics work, right? So if you worked in ZS or a EXL where you have done simple analytics for a firm, that also adds value, right? And if you have worked as a software engineer, or if you have worked, like done a MTech or BTech in computer science, again, that's a plus point. So any of this or a combination of this or even none of this, right, can help, because again, say the company is really focused on case preps and they just liked what you wrote and they want to give you a shot at the interview, and if you ace the interview, you might just select it. So
Okay, guys, so there's a question from Mohit on the chat. He is asking how different are the interview questions in B2C versus B2B firms. So I guess all three of you collectively can answer this.
Yeah. So according to me, frankly, there is not no real difference. It's just the job that differs. Both B2B and B2C firms expect the same things from the interviewees. I don't think there's any difference in the question categories or the prep. I don't think so.
yeah, exactly the same. So one more addition is that, like I said, should be a domain expertise as well. So means it will vary from firm to firm. Like based on the firm that's come to interview, you have to read about its products. One good product or any product information or the domain that it's working in, or the technology that's evolving around the market that it serves. So that's the only thing that's going to change from your interview. The basic ideals or the basic principles of those interviews, they remain the same. Domain is different.
Right. +1 to that.
Guys, if you have any other questions, you can just unmute and ask right away.
Yeah, hey guys, I had a question. So I guess in the second slide, there was a mention of a thing called PRD. So is this similar to a BRD? And if so, what is the level of granularity that we're looking at? Is it click level or a business perspective?
Oh, I was waiting for someone. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
You guys got the question, right?
Yeah. So the BRD is more of a more holistic, I would say, in terms of what the business requirements is, and BRDs are generally, I think that's more on the strategy side of it, like where you want the business to be in 5 years, or what are the short term and long term revenue goals, and as such, PRDs are much more granular, right? So like it boils down to what you want to do as a product manager, what you want to do with your product, and even for the next release, right? We write PRDs mostly not for the entire product chunk of it, but what's gonna come up for the next release. If you do a big bang release where release comes every 6 months or 3 months, you write a PRD for that. Or in a startup, say if the release is for a week or 2 weeks even, you write for that. So it's much more granular, and it involves a lot of UX requirements, a lot of compliance requirements, a lot of security requirements, and basically involves what the next logical step in the product is going to be. BRD, I think, and as far as I've seen, is much more holistic in terms of what it means for the company as a whole, and not just your product. That's my take. Varun, if you have anything to add.
No, I actually thought the same thing. So basically, both of these are documents that you write at different points in your career, is what I think. So I would be writing a PRD. Maybe like 2 levels senior to me, people would be writing PRDs. Like that's the only addition I would like give.
Okay, right. Thank you.
So guys, there's another question in the chat by Payal, which asks that the interview rounds that you guys have suggested are specific to campus placements for PGPs, or is it in general? She's from an MBAX program, so should she also prepare for such rounds?
Yes, Amarth. I think these rules that we have taken, or the question categories that we have taken, are mostly derived from case interview preps or the books that we have read, right? And that applies across the spectrum for all tech companies. So if on campus Microsoft is asking a set of guesstimates and a set of design questions, they're gonna probably ask the same for a person who interviews from outside or a person or a software engineer who works at Microsoft and wants to come up to a product manager level, right? It's the same rules that apply to everyone. They want to check about your thinking process, your thought processes, and what are your contribution skills to that role and how fit you are for that role.
So it would probably be the same globally, right? Similar
Yeah,
process.
yeah. It's the same process globally.
I just add to this, like a couple of my friends are currently giving interviews off campus, and the process is exactly the same. And a couple of my friends from engineering days also, like who are looking to switch from engineering to PM, they also end up giving interviews which are exactly the same. Design questions, root cause analysis questions, guesstimates, and things like this. Maybe guesstimates not so much, but the other categories were definitely the same. So, and if you see books like Decode and Conquer and Cracking the PM Interview, they are not specifically for MBA candidates. They are for anyone who is looking to get into the PM field. So, as Samad said, these are things which are applicable globally and not just specific to India or to PGPs or to MBAs. Right. Do we have any other questions, guys? Because it's 7:30 and we've already, I think, taken 30 minutes
Exceeded
extra.
time
So
limit.
yeah.
So there's one question again on the chat. So Mitali is asking, during summers there were a bunch of PM roles not open for freshers. Does that change in the finals?
I think there are chances, though most of the other bigger chunk of the product companies will visit in laterals. But in our finals as well, there were a few companies like Varun mentioned VMOC was there, and even three, four other firms were there, but not exactly in a product role, but an associated role in a tech firm might be there for freshers. I cannot comment at this moment if those roles will be available to you for your finals because it depends from year to year. But yes, there are roles that that are available in finals during the finals phase for even freshers, and they do give a chance.
So as a place rep, you would say that this people have this mentality that PM is not for freshers. That has no base, right?
All right. So last year, one of the Microsoft hires was a fresher, right? And the other one, I think went to nationals for Microsoft PM Challenge, and that's one way that he got a call, and he again converted the call. So it's more about how and the circumstances of it, and if the company is willing to look at it. They have different requirements for different positions, and I think it doesn't really matter. You just have to gotta hope for the best. Means there would be opportunities. Agreed, those are less, but I don't think those are zero.
Alright, I guess so. That's all of our questions, and that's pretty much it. So thank you guys. Thanks a lot. So this has been really helpful for all of us when preparing for the second year interviews, be it laterals or finals. So we're gonna come back to you. A lot of us are gonna come back to you with our questions. So guys, you can follow these people on LinkedIn, and you can also mail us your queries, or you can follow us on the social media handles on LinkedIn and Twitter, which have been mentioned on the chat. So we can reach these guys and get your questions answered. We'll also be sharing the PPT as well as the video of this webinar. So you can refer that and share it to your friends as well who might have missed this one. So that's it from us. Thank you guys. Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Ayusha. And thank you all for attending.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
it was great, man. Thanks everyone.